You've clicked on to this special Tropical Storm Leslie update for the 5th of September. It's Tuesday evening here in Scotland, and we continue to keep our focus fully on Tropical Storm Leslie. It remains a 65 mile per hour, 992 millibar low, our tropical storm should I say, and it continues to feel the effects of dry air as well as wind shear. Let's have an up close look at the system here, and you can clearly mark out where exactly the centre of circulation really is. It's really right in the middle here where the curl of cloud is, and what's interesting here is I'm going to mark it for you. You can see here that's where the centre of circulation is, but notice the core, the convection, the large area, the canopy of deepest convection is offset. It's off to the eastern side of the system, and you can see here the lack of cloud cover here in the western side of the storm. Dry air is getting fed into the circulation, as well as that it's also feeding in some upper level wind shear as well, which of course is deflecting that convection off centre here. Notice here off this water vapour loop, you can see here plenty of dry air out ahead of the system here, so that is impeding things and whatnot. But you can see here trough over the United States. On the tail end of the trough, what's interesting is we have got the ghost of Isaac here. Circulation of course made landfall last week in Louisiana, hooked up over the Midwest and came back down around with the second trough, and the models have certainly jumped onto the idea of this thing regenerating. It wouldn't be named Isaac, but it would be potentially another depression, if not a storm, and it could cause a bit of a ruckus here in the northern Gulf of Mexico. I don't believe it's going to become anything spectacular, but it could be a big rainmaker, could produce some heavy surf on the coast, and as well as that some beach erosion, some gusty winds as well. But it's very interesting meteorology when you see this. We've seen it with Ivan back in 2004 as well, where it hooked up over the United States and came back into the Gulf and regenerated, making a second landfall, interesting enough. But that's with that feature. Of course, all eyes on Tropical Storm Leslie here. I'm going to show you here, this is what I've got out for Tropical Storm Leslie. I do think it will become a pretty substantial storm. We've got a trough of course over the North Atlantic to the north of the system at the moment here. That's producing some of that shear. We've also got a trough now starting to develop over the United States, and what that will do is here is with that trough it's going to then push the ridge of high pressure off towards the east, build that ridge over to east of of Leslie, and what that will do is it's going to open up a door here to the north here. So that trough is going to start to drive southeastwards. As it does so, it's going to then start to allow a ridge of high pressure to then intensify over and east of Leslie here. So that is really the idea here, that this trough here is going to then start building heights to the east, and as it does so it's going to then start to create a flow out of the southeast, and therefore it's going to start to pick Leslie up. And as it does so, unfortunately, the conditions are going to become more favourable, and of course with warm waters beneath it, the system is expected to intensify into a hurricane. I'm concerned here, Bermuda's right here, that as the system pushes 50 miles to the west of Bermuda, it could be a strong Cat 2, if not a weak Cat 3 hurricane. Now the last time a hurricane of Category 3 passed within 50 miles of Bermuda was back in 2003. That was Hurricane Fabian, produced 145 mile per hour winds on the island. 80% of the island was knocked out of power. The good thing with Fabian, however, was that it was a very fast moving system. This time around with Leslie, if it is a strong Cat 2 or 3, say 110 to 115 mile per hour sustained winds, and it pushes just within 50 miles west of the islands, of course west of the island would be the worst case for Bermuda, because it would actually have the worst conditions on the island with Leslie. The problem is, with the slow movement and at that intensity, we actually could conceivably see worse conditions than what we've seen with Fabian, given the slow movement. Now, of course, with that trough digging in over the course of the next 3 to 5 days here, that of course is going to then create a path here towards the north. The ridge of high pressure building towards the east is therefore going to create this channel here, this funnel for this system to work northwards. And I'm very concerned that while we see a miss on the east coast thanks to this trough, we are potentially going to see a landfall on the western side of Nova Scotia by the time we get out there by Tuesday. What's interesting also is the fact that between now and Saturday night and into Sunday, we'll see very little movement from what will be Hurricane Leslie. But once this trough starts to dig in, once this ridge starts to build to the east, it will then start to speed up, and as it continues further and further north, it will speed up even more so, because it's going to start to catch the upper level steering winds, the westerlies from this trough. Now, the big concern is that as this system pushes north of Bermuda, I think that's when the models, as well as I think is going to happen, is that we're going to see this system peak in intensity, and the concern is that the peak actually could be a major category 3, so a strong category 3, say 125 to 130 mile per hour, or it may even become a weak category 4. Now that is a wee bit of a long shot, I think, at the moment. I do think it's very plausible to have a moderate to strong category 3, but I'm not ruling out the potential here for a weak category 4 hurricane. So that's winds above 135 miles per hour sustained. I do think it's conceivable. Now, why do I think it's conceivable? Let's have a look at the water temperature anomaly. So this isn't sea surface temperatures, it's the anomalies here, and the very area that I think is going to peak is right around here, and I do think that the water temperatures are warm enough and deep enough to sustain that intensity. Now, the biggest concern here is that while we've got a warmer than normal Gulf Stream here, which runs up here, I actually should have backed that area of maximum intensity further west. In fact, it's more towards here. As this system tracks like I have got in my forecast track in this general fashion here, up and making landfall in the western or central portions of Nova Scotia, notice the water temperature anomalies. They're about as high as they are anywhere in the Atlantic Basin. So that you're talking, you know, upwards of 3 Celsius above normal surrounding Newfoundland, or 2 Celsius above normal off the east or the New England coastline. That is the same region that we've got a pretty strong Hurricane Leslie coming up from the south. Now, of course, when you've got a scenario where you've got a peak intensity between Bermuda and Nova Scotia, you've also got, of course, the highest temperature anomalies the further north you go. Given the fact that the system is going to then speed up as it heads northwards, you know, if it peaks at strong category 3 or week 4, as it's speeding up, there's very little time for the system then to start weakening before it makes that landfall on Nova Scotia. So you've got a scenario of Juan on 2003 all over again. It made landfall in Nova Scotia as a 100 mile an hour Cat 2 hurricane. The potential here is very high for a major landfall on the Nova Scotia coastline. I'm not saying major in terms of Cat 3, but I'm saying a major impact storm, because you're going to have a very strong hurricane develop into the south of Nova Scotia. Then the trough comes in from the east. It's going to then speed the circulation up the forward speed, and then of course it has less time to weaken. and of course it is interacting with way above normal water temperatures, so you've got the conditions there for a significant impact in Nova Scotia by the time we get out to about